Ladies and gentlemen, people of the horse racing community, it's Pony Pundits time. Two white old men in terrible shirts, Marco D'Angelo and Sig. I'm going to hand this show over to you, but guys, what the hell are you wearing?
Well, I broke out a shirt today because I can't, have Sig taking all the limelight with these ugly shirts, but oh my God, he crushed me again.
But really, I know he actually did crush you, and I really like the fact that he matched the undershirt.
Oh, look at this guy. Yeah, he's ready to, appear on an episode of Miami Vice. Come on.
Okay, I mean, it really begs the question, and everybody wants to know, how did you, what possessed you to buy the shirt? Did you think there would be a day when an ugly shirt was required, or you liked the shirt at the time? It was a bad bet went wrong. Marco, explain.
I mean, my shirt's nowhere near as ugly as Sig's. Come on.
Yeah, but Sig wears ugly shirts every week, so I'm just assuming he thinks they're nice.
Well, let's Sig answer that one.
Well, hey, in show 3, I wore a Hawaiian-ish shirt that I had worn actually to dinner with Marco last spring, which he didn't remember. He made a few comments on it. I nailed the pick 4 at Gulfstream that day. So from there, I'm sticking with the shirt. I am superstitious.
Oh, my God.
Where did we eat at? I had to be preoccupied that I didn't remember because I have been marred by the vision of that. Did you try to wear that shirt to curb my appetite?
No, we were at Lotus of Siam.
Oh, yeah.
Totally overrated place, Marco. Me and you went there. I did not think it was as good as you did. But anyway, I got one episode left of Fauda, so I'm going to miss this show. I'll be downstairs. You guys can torque horses till you're blue in the face.
You're blue in the shirt.
I don't even own an ugly shirt like that, so I can't join you guys. But
thanks for opening the show for us, and get the hell out of
here. Yeah, enjoy, boys. Right, love you both.
Sig, big weekend, buddy. We've got what should have been the Kentucky Derby this weekend. You should have been here in Las Vegas this weekend, as you normally would be for the Kentucky Derby. We would have had a couple nights of chicken wings, pizza rock, meatballs, a couple other, fine dining establishments leading up to the Derby. And then depending on how Saturday went, would have determined where we were eating Saturday night. Sorry you're not here, miss you, and, we'll have to just carry on. And the tradition, I know there's going to be a lot of people disappointed at South Point this year because anybody that was in the vicinity of our tables for the last few years, there was always an excess of free drink coupons at our table. We were always very popular because as much as we, my crew drinks, and I'm not one of them that drinks a lot, so I don't aid to that, but I am one of the number one contributors to those free drink tickets with my bets. We're pretty popular at South Point on Kentucky Derby Saturday, aren't we?
We are very popular among our friends and people that weren't our friends that have become our friends for free drink tickets.
Yes, absolutely. And say, big show. Some news broke in the last 24 hours. We're going to get to that in a second. And then not one, but 2 races of the day because we've got the Arkansas Derbies, plural. We got 2 divisions. We're going to talk about that. Then, of course, our pick 4 and what other way to do the pick 4 this week than to do that late pick 4 at Oaklawn with the big races. And it's going to be a fantastic 4-race pick 4. Well, maybe a fantastic 3-race pick 4 and 1 race. We'll get to that in a moment. And Sig, I was going to put story time and handicapping tips on hold this week because we got such a power-packed show. But about 30 minutes before the show today, I got a handicapping tip and a story all in one, so I couldn't leave it go. And, whenever Sig sent me over this morning his pick 4 so I could put it into my show notes so I could, have his numbers when we're talking about it, I texted him back and said, you left a horse off in one of the legs. I said, I love this horse. It's a big long shot. I said, I think you got to use him on the ticket. And I told him, my exact text to him was, go back. I gave him the horse number for this week so that he could look in the program to see when he raced last and then go back and look at that replay. And I said, just go watch the replay. You'll thank me later. I don't hear anything back from the man. And I'm like, did he even look at the race? What? So I texted him. I said, did you look at the replay? He goes, what? I said, the replay I told you to look at. So then a couple of minutes later, he says, yeah, I see a horse that, how did you exactly say it? Finished up, he was done, no factor, and that's it.
Nothing left in the stretch. Nothing left in the stretch.
And I'm like, is this guy high or blind? Which is it? Okay. And, I text him back and I said, what are you looking at? And I spelled out in the text exactly the points of the race to look at. And then I get a text back and he goes, oh, I was watching the wrong horse. Oh, okay. So here's your handicapping tip today. Last week we talked about trip handicapping. And trip handicapping is a very valuable tool if you look at the right freaking horse. Okay. And in Sig's defense, what happened, and I forgot about it to point it out to him, when you look in the program and you look to see what the horse, number was time he raced, there was a scratch, or it's a race that there was an entry in there, a 1 and a 1A. And then they'll have different post positions than their saddle cloth numbers. If there was a scratch, and in this instance, the horse that I was talking about was saddle cloth number 8, but he actually broke from post position 7, which is what the program showed. So Sig was watching the 7 horse, and yeah, that horse had nothing in the stretch. He was correct. He did watch the 7 horse the entire race. But the horse that I told him to watch, yeah, multiple times. And you're probably thinking I'm high or blind when you're watching the race. Then when he went back and actually watched the right race, he saw what about that when we do the pick 4, and I'll explain what horse that is and tell you guys what to go back and look at so you can see the kind of things that I look at for trip handicapping. So that is your handicapping tip for today. Sig, big news this week. And when you tweeted it out yesterday and I replied to it and I said the only thing to make me happier is if I could see a certain track in Pennsylvania announcing their opening. But go ahead and tell our listeners about the openings that were announced yesterday.
Well, with the country slowly starting to reopen, we are starting to get some racetracks that will be reopening without fans. News broke earlier this week. Santa Anita's going to start racing on May 15th. Churchill Downs followed that up with they're opening their backstretch here early next week, and their first race will be May 16th. Belmont Park has plans in place to race without fans, but they are waiting on government direction on when they can start racing. Mountaineer in West Virginia is opening on May 31st with their first race. Again, no fans at these races. Still waiting on word for Charlestown in West Virginia, but West Virginia has approved racing. Canterbury Park up in Minnesota is going to be opening their backside on May 8th. No word, though, when they will begin racing, but we are slowly and starting to see racing resume here, and we should get some tracks that we are a little more interested in betting at.
Yeah, and for me, as I said, my track in Pennsylvania, the Meadows, it's a harness racing track, and that's where my horses are at. They, right now, where they are at, they have, by May 8th, they have to submit their plans for the reopening process, just like all the casinos are doing here in Vegas. Vegas is going to open the casinos, I expect, probably June 1st is more likely of a date. There's been some rumors, some places had reservations that they were taking on their sites for May 15th, but I don't think that's going to materialize. But they have to submit plans on what they're going to do in regards. And the problem of Pennsylvania tracks is my track, there really isn't a problem because Western Pennsylvania and where the Meadows is, They're south of Pittsburgh, only about a 25-minute drive from the West Virginia border. So it's really in a rural area. We haven't had the confirmed cases in Western Pennsylvania that the other part of the state has had. And when looking at the racing for Pennsylvania, they're looking at Pennsylvania as a whole unit. And there are several tracks in the Philadelphia area. You've got Penn National, you've got Philadelphia Parks, you've got Harrah's in Philadelphia for harness racing. And the problem with those areas for Pennsylvania is they're very close to where the epicenters of the outbreaks have been. New Jersey's been hit hard, New York's been hit hard, and so you've had some cross-contamination there in the horse industry coming through those states. So that's why we're in trouble with Pennsylvania a little bit, why they've been slower. And I'll do my political stand for 1 second. The governor of Pennsylvania has been no friend to horse racing at all. In fact, earlier this year, he tried to push a bill through the Senate where he was trying to take money out of the horsemen's fund for some other things in the state. And it didn't go through, but he has said, even though it got shot down, that he is not given up on the bill yet. So he's kind of got a little bit of a hard on for the race industry. I don't know why, but it just, there's so many jobs involved. I've been on that platform before. It's not just at the racetrack. This has a trickle down effect to the farmers, everything that are involved in the horse industry. All right, enough about the news and notes for this week in the horse racing world. The big news is it's the first Saturday in May tomorrow. And SIG, normally this would be the Kentucky Derby, but it is going to be the Arkansas Derby. And we have two divisions of it. And I want to ask you first off, before we start tearing these two races apart, there was a lot of speculation, that there was going to be so many entries in the Arkansas Derby. And this was a race that if they only went with one division, which is what they normally do, it's only 14 horses. That's all they can put in the gate at Oaklawn. And if there was only 14 and there was more than 14 entered, the horses that would be left out, how the deciding factor would have been stakes earnings. Horses, the amount of money they earned in graded stakes. Well, that would have left horses out like Charlatan, that although is 2 for 2, he hasn't raced in a stake race yet. So he would have been left, he would have been on the outside looking in. They did decide to go with two divisions. They had 22 horses entered. Now, we've had several scratches in the last 2 days that's brought this field down, and probably if these horses wouldn't have been in to go, they definitely wouldn't have went with two divisions. They would have went with one, and, we would have had 4 horses, SOL, unfortunately. But the big question was, and I want to ask you, are you surprised in the second part of this? Because the speculation was, well, if you go with two divisions, what do you do with the points? Because this is one of the races, it's a major prep race for the Kentucky Derby, and all of the major races has a point system. 100 points goes to the winning horse in the race, and I think it's 140, 20, 10 or something. How would they distribute the points if they went for two divisions? And Churchill Downs, where the Kentucky Derby is held, the Kentucky Derby Committee voted and let them go with full point distribution for both races, which definitely helps a horse like Charlatan that has not raced yet on the Derby trail to get any points. Were you surprised by their decision?
Surprise is one way to put it. Ticked is another way to put it. You were just on your soapbox. Now it's my turn. Oaklawn Park, you blew it. You had the Kentucky Derby postponed till September. You took that date, the biggest race day of the year, first Saturday in May. Could have had the best horses in a primo Derby race here. Imagine this race. Nadal, King Guillermo, Wells Bayou, Silver Prospector, Storm the Court, Ano Dior, Gouverneur Morris, Basin, possibly Charlatan. all on in the same race, in the same track. But no, what do? We add in horses that had never raced in a stake race. Charlatan aside, Charlatan, they could have found a way to get him in there, I think. Baffert probably didn't want both. I think Baffert liked the fact that Nadal wasn't going to have to face Charlatan here, heads up. But you have horses coming in here that are not even winning allowance races in this premier race. They had every opportunity here to make this the biggest race of the weekend, of the day, and to have all the focus on there. Now all the focus on the fact that we have one really weak division, one decent division, both 9-horse fields. It just could have been done so much better. And yes, they're awarding a lot more points here. And it's a sort of a flyby, see their pants for Churchill and the Kentucky Derby Committee right now, because you don't know what preps are going to be rescheduled and what other races this summer could become preps for with the Derby now in September. But you could have had a premier race here this Saturday that would have drawn the attention of the entire country. And now you have a watered-down workout for one horse, in my opinion, and a decent field for the other race. But it could have been done so much better, and I really wish we could have seen the race that could have been.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in there and echo your thoughts there. The two divisions, as we break them down, say in, me being in horse racing, and a lot of times this happens in overnight races where you have a particular class that's run on a particular day. And a lot of times, there's more horses entered than can race in that race. So a lot of times you'll see also eligibles. You'll see horses that'll get left out and just have to wait till the next week when that race is, written. Or you'll see if there's enough in the entry box and the race secretary needs the race, he will split the race and run in two divisions. And oftentimes you will see it. Most race secretaries will not admit it, but they get accused of it a lot when one race comes up as soft as the one division did and the other division comes up as tough as it did. Did he seed them? And what seeding means is just like the NCAA tournament, when you've got the different regions and they're seeded from 1 to 16, one division got the 1 through 8s, and the other division got the 9 to 16 horses, so to speak, in the seeding. And that's where we're going to start this one out, because I don't think you could have hand seeded the two divisions and made it an easier race than we got in the first race, and that is race 11, Saturday at Oaklawn Park. And it starts with Charlatan. He drew the rail. Tell me how this horse can lose this race, because I've looked this race upside, in every which way you can. And when we were talking earlier in the week, I liked your reply to me by text when I said, how does he lose this race? And do you remember what you said?
I can paraphrase that. Basically, he would need to run the wrong direction when the gates open in order to lose this race.
Basically, yes. This is a horse for Bob Baffert that if there's any horse that has benefited more by the Kentucky Derby being pushed back to September, I can't think of one other horse possibly, but it might not come into play if he doesn't get back to the races by September and find a place to get some points to get in, and that would be Maxfield with the injury. Charlatan is definitely the horse that has benefited by this race being in September. The horse has only 2 lifetime starts, and a lot of people were making comparisons to Justify. But yes, I see the similarities in Justify in the way the horse was lightly raced, blah, blah, blah. Had to get him, basically rushed to the Derby. But we know that Justify was able to handle it. The difference was Justify in those, found some, good races to get into, and of course had the Santa Anita Derby and stuff. This horse didn't have that shot, and if he didn't have the 2 divisions today, most likely would not have gotten into this race to get the points. And there's really nobody in here that I see that can beat the horse. I know there'll be some support for the 4-horse Gouverneur Morris, but, he was a little bit of a disappointment in his last race in the Florida Derby. A lot of people thought highly of him there, And of course, we know who, prevailed in the Florida Derby with Tisnow. How do you see this race?
Tisnow, really? In the Florida
Or
Derby?
no, I'm sorry,
the
Tis the Law. Sorry, got to say. When you get, if you've been following horses as long as I have, and then you see all these different generations of the horses and their sires, and they just all start blending together.
Well, don't worry. If you want to see some old horses run, apparently tomorrow on NBC they're going to run a virtual Kentucky Derby with all the Triple Crown winners. So Tisnow won't be in there either, but someday. But we were going here with Charlatan and race number 11, Arkansas Derby, Division 1 on Saturday. The son of Spicetown is following the career trajectory of Justify, which Marco just said, and that worked out pretty well for Bob Baffert and Justify. This will be Charlatan's first attempt in stakes company, but he did draw the weaker division here, and I really don't see how anybody in here is going to give him a battle. As long as he shows up with his A game, he's faster than these horses. Baffert did say this week he did not like the fact that he drew the one post. You do it to work a little harder to get out of there. But the one post is sort of like the far outside post. Is you sort of a little bit more energy at the beginning of the race, but I think he gets out to the lead and just sort of says, "Play, come catch me," the whole race.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anybody that's going to be able to come and catch him. I will say this much: for a race that was soft already, it got extremely softer when Shooter Shoot scratched. We also have that he's the 6th that's out of the race, and number 7 Wrecking Crew is out of the race. And Shooter Shoot, the reason that is the big scratch in this race is because that would have been one of the horses that would have been leaving and maybe running with Charlatan early and make him work a little bit. Now with him not in the race, I think that once Charlatan gets to the top, which he will, he's going to be able to dictate the pace. And I think it's going to be a modest pace because who is going to want to go and run with him? And when you can get away with, and I go back to the Florida Derby last year with Maximum Security, how, I thought he stole the Florida Derby with the fractions that he got. And some other things that he got. We won't go down that road again. But this is a situation where he's going to be able to dictate the pace of the race. And I think a horse that is going to benefit from this is going to be the 8 horse, Ano Dior. This is a horse that throw out the last race, okay? And we're going to throw that last race out. It was his first start of the year. They made an equipment change in the race. They put blinkers on and actually had to reverse effect putting the blinkers on. Usually you put the blinkers on to fire a horse up. Well, this horse had tactical speed to start with. Maybe they wanted him just to be a little bit closer to the pace. Well, it didn't work. He got away, broke from the gate, not good. He got away 7th out of 11. Then he did get to 4th, and then inside just didn't respond at all and back through the field. If you put a line through that race and look at the rest of his races, this is a horse that can be right there. He's a horse that's only got 4 lifetime starts. When we talk about these 3-year-olds in this time of the season, I like to talk about the horses that have room to improve. They've only had a few starts. You don't know where their ceiling is yet, and I think that this is a horse that has a license to improve. And if you go back to his final 2 races last year, Grade 1 juvenile finished second by a head to storm the court, and then comes back the next race and finishes second by a neck, 1,000 words. The Lossell Futurity. This is a horse that I think can have second in this race. I don't know that he's good enough to pull the upset because I think Charlatan is head and shoulders above this field. But I've got him in my ticket as my second choice, and my numbers for this race are 1, 8, 4, 10. How do you see it?
Just to piggyback on you, yeah. if you're looking for value, if you think you can beat Charlatan, and that's how we do make money in betting horses, is you find a favorite that you think horse that might give you some value here in this race. It is number 8, Ano Dior, a 6-1 in the morning line that may drift up even a little more here come post time. But if Charlatan does lose to someone in here, that's who I see winning the race. Gouverneur Morris is the other horse I used in my exactas. I am keying Charlatan over the 4, Gouverneur Morris, and the 8, Ano Dior. I don't think anybody else in here has basically a chance of making a difference.
Yeah, I threw a long shot in here for my 4th number sake, and that's Crypto Cash. And this is a horse that has 1 start. The problem with him is 1 start this season, I should say. The problem with him is he hasn't faced this kind of company at all. But he has been the last race. I think he just needed that race. That was his first race since November. I think pure and simple, watching the race, they didn't get him into play early in that race. To me, it was a training tightener. It was looking ahead to this race, and I think that he has a shot to pick up the pieces late. He likes to close. The problem with him saying that he likes to close is the fact that for closers, if it's you're going to have trouble making up ground. So that's why I only have him on the 4th spot. I'll probably use him in some trifectas, on, the bottom tier of my exotics there. And if, we do any superfectas, definitely I'll have him on there in the 4th spot for sure. But we're pretty much in agreement on this one. Before we get to race of the day part 2, the second of the Arkansas Derby, I just want to remind everybody, check out WagerTalk daily shows every week. We've got 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, not 1, but 2 live shows each week. One of them airs at 12 noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. The other one at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can check that out. Of course, Sig and I are here with you every Friday at 3 o'clock doing the show. Also, if you are looking for horse selections, Sig covers you down there in Florida, Gulfstream Park, every day of their racing meet. And then you head over to Tampa Bay on Wednesday and take some races there. And God bless you, my man, for trying to handicap Tampa Bay Downs. I look at that Tampa Bay card every day, and I watch the races, and I look at the payoffs, and I mean, like, oh my God. I know there's been a lot of long shots around the country, because everything is, changed as far as training schedules and where horses are and where they, had planned to be at a different location. But I haven't seen a track like Tampa on a daily basis, unless you want to talk about the last race at Oaklawn or last, of the day, each day, where you just see big balloons all the time.
Tampa definitely gives me headaches. Some weeks we are decent there. Some weeks we have a rough week there, but it's fun trying.
It is. But here's the thing, guys, about horse racing. And if you're new to horse racing and you're following guys, doing sheets, and I'm covering Oaklawn most of the time. Once Santa Anita opens, that's my track. That's the track I like to. Santa Anita and Del Mar, those are the 2 tracks that I like to hone in on, in addition to my hometown track. So I'm excited about getting the West Coast racing back and get some things on normal. But if you're new to horse racing, don't get discouraged when you lose, if you lose 3-4 races in a row. That's the beauty of horse racing. This is not sports betting where you're betting 11-10, okay? And, you got to win 52.38% of the time. You don't. When you hit a horse race, you're winning more money than you're investing. And if you hit one of those balloon races, sometimes one race can make an entire week. A big race can make an entire. So you're looking for the scores. And although your win percentage will not be as high as sports betting, it's just like when you're betting baseball and, we preach betting underdogs and small favorites. There's a reason. because you don't have to have that 52.38% win rate to show a profit. And that's the thing about horse racing. So on a daily basis, if you guys want to check out Sig or myself, basically one of us has something up each day. You can check out the horse racing selections each day at WagerTalk.com. All right, Sig, let's head into race number 2 of Race of the Day, and that will be race number 13 on the Oaklawn card. It is obviously the toughest division. Very good race. We've got the big name horse from Big Bob, Nadal. This is a horse that going into his last race, the Rebel Stakes, this horse has had fanfare from the day he stepped onto the racetrack. He was a $700,000 purchase as a yearling, and he has lived up to the price tag so far. Horse is 3 for 3. But when he went to that last race, say, until horses do it, the same questions are there for every horse. Can the horse handle 2 turns? Can the horse carry the distance? Because now as we get into the Triple Crown races, we're going to have 3 different distances. And for most of these horses, the Kentucky Derby will be the furthest race that they have run in their career. So we always have that question about the 2 turns and the distance. Well, he answered them, and he answered them in a big way in the Rebel. Tell us your thoughts on this race, and let's start with Nadal, because that's where you got to start this one.
Nadal, and going back to look at his Rebel, the horse showed a ton of heart. The horse battled early and had the battle early. The pace was pressed early on. He stayed on it, and then he got to have the battle again. Him and Ginobili went down the stretch, and Ginobili gave him everything he could handle. He basically took it and pulled.
Ginobili was the other race.
I jumped through the San Vicente.
Yes, you did. But he did battle with Ginobili in that race.
In the San Vicente at Sandia. Thank you, Mario. Gave him all he could handle. He battled him down the stretch, and then if you watch that race, at the end, he pulls away from Ginobili. Ginobili basically gave him everything he had left in the tank, and Nadal still had more. That showed a ton of heart from a horse in his second start ever. Came back here in the Rebel, same thing. He had the battle pace early, battle pace at the top of the stretch, and battled down the stretch and still put horses away. It shows a ton of heart. It's a horse I like, but I am going to try to beat him here today.
Yeah, and I just want to say, too, maybe some new listeners to horse racing, when Sig is talking about heart, you hear the phrase, heart of a champion and so forth and that. And in the Rebel Stakes, the fact that he had a horse at his throat the entire race, and he did put that horse away to top of the stretch. And as they turned for home, he started to open up on that horse. And so many times we see this in horse racing. People go, why'd the favorite get beat? Well, maybe somebody that was a long shot went suicide fractions with them or whatever and took the race out of them. And then one of those other horses that was fresh and hadn't been used yet comes from off the pace and then goes by him late, in deep stretch. Well, that's what was setting up in the Rebel. A horse was coming from off the pace that hadn't been used yet and was coming full of run. And when he got up to Nadal, when he was closing, you thought he was going to go by Nadal. And once Nadal saw him out of the corner of his eye, you saw Nadal dig in, and they could have went around the racetrack a whole nother lap, and he wasn't going by Nadal. And that is where the phrase heart comes from, and it is the heart of a champion. And Nadal answered every question and test to me in the Rebel. Now, with that said, let's go to another horse in this race, and it's the 4 horse, King Guillermo. This is a horse that in the Tampa Bay Derby, we just talked about Tampa and how we get these big long shots, 49-1, he blew up the tote board. And to be honest, he made a shambles of the field. Okay, big race, just put everybody away. Where did that race come from? And Sig, I think one of the factors that why he got left off the tote board the way he did, and this is something that you generally don't see a lot with horses on the Derby trail. His previous 2 races were on the turf, and his lone dirt race was his first career start, and it was horrible. So I think people dismissed him, me included, because until we saw that horse race a good race on dirt, you would have thought this horse was going to be a turf horse. What's your thoughts?
Agree completely. Going into the Tampa Bay Derby, nobody knew what to expect out of this horse. And it's one of the things you find, especially with younger horses, 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds early in their career, you don't have enough data to work off of. You're working. That's why race replays are a great place to look, because you can actually see how the horse performs. When you're trying to see it on a past performance, especially in this case with King Guillermo, debuted on the dirt, didn't look great. They switch him to the turf. He braces maiden and then runs well in the next race on the turf. Then he's off for 3+ months. Comes back on the Tampa Bay Derby, no warm up, nothing. Comes in here and just basically says, "Hey, come catch me, field." And they couldn't. Went the whole way around. But when you're looking at this, most of these horses that you're going to see in these big 3-year-old races are going to be dirt horses. The Triple Crown races are all run the dirt and so forth. King Guillermo was a mystery, and there are other horses you'll come across that are a mystery just because they don't have the track record to look at. They may have been racing on different surfaces, but it's finding those keys in there. And as you could see on Tampa Bay Derby Day at 49-1, not too many people found King Guillermo that day.
Yeah, and I'll throw out a horse, and, again, shameless plug for me for being able to bring out one of my better derbies. But Animal Kingdom was a horse that we scored big with several years ago. And that was a horse that, again, people questioned if he could go on dirt. And, he turned out to do just fine on dirt. The other thing that I'll say about King Guillermo is that I talk about this every year when you and I are breaking down all the Derby horses. And I say that when you see a horse that has 3, 4, or 5 starts, we haven't seen the ceiling yet at all, okay? And these horses have a license to make that big jump where, you might see a 7, 8, 9-point jump in a Beyer speed figure, and like you'll say, where the hell did that come from? And to me, I like to use a phrase with some of these young horses where sometimes it's almost like somebody turned a light switch on. The light bulb went on. They finally put it all together. These horses are creatures of habit. They're learning. Now, granted, the superstars or the freaks, they just have it. But some of these horses have to learn their craft. And they put it all together in that one race. And then after that one race out of nowhere, they go on a tear. And anytime you see a race like he had last time, 2 things come to mind. Okay, is he going to bounce, or was it the light bulb race? And I'm going to go, it was the light bulb race, because everybody that's talking about this horse, that are writing about the horse, the clockers that are at the track, clocking the workouts, and seeing this horse on the track, some of the video clips that have been shown on Twitter and YouTube, this horse has gotten better since the Tampa Bay Derby, which all indications are that, yes, it was the light bulb and not, one of those, where did that come from? And he's going to regress off of it. So he's definitely a horse that is going to be a contender in this race. And I think that he's going to sit right off of Nadal and Wells Bayou, the other speed horse in this race. He'll be sitting in that stalking position, sitting, right there third, ready to make his move when he wants to. So I think you got to consider him. And it's great. Everybody loves, if it was Kentucky Derby Saturday, I guarantee you all the stories one of the major stories, other than Bob Baffert, which, you know, is always going to be a story on Kentucky Derby Day, would be the ownership of this horse. Former Major League Baseball player from the Detroit Tigers, Victor Martinez, owner of this horse. And he has just, since retiring, has been ecstatic about horse racing, and he's made no bones about it. He wanted to buy a Derby horse, and they made the purchase for this horse, and he's having a ride of his lifetime right now. And the only bad part is that he's not getting to feel the full thrill of, you know, being at a track with, you know, 50,000 people at the Kentucky Derby and so forth, you know, the full experience, but he's still enjoying the ride nonetheless. Sig, how about another horse you want to talk about in this one?
Well, basically, you were talking about the early pace here, and I see King Guillermo, Nadal, and this horse as pressing the early pace here. And I'm thinking we might see an early speed battle that may set this race up for a closer. Hint, hint. Wells Bayou is another horse that needs to be or wants to be on the lead, along with Nadal and King Guillermo. Very fast horse. Came out here and he won here last out at the Louisiana Derby. He's out of looking at Lucky. And I think what I foresee happening here is, and what you do when you handicap is you're trying to figure out how the race is going to play out in your head by looking at what happens on paper. And I see Wells Bayou starting from a far outside post, along with Nadal starting from a middle post, and King Guillermo starting from a middle post, all trying to get out to the early lead here on this race. It depends on what happens on who gets to the lead and who's going to decide if they want to try to rate their horse. None of the three have actually rated in any of their previous races. By rating, I mean the jockey keeps the horse just off the pace, pressing it, but not trying to set the pace for the race, keeping enough in reserve to try to open it up. And once the lead horse starts to run down a little bit, runs out of a little bit of fuel, make their move, and still have a fresh horse to make a run late. But what happens sometimes is what Marco said earlier too, suicide fractions, is where horses are going too fast on the front end. And I think that's what we might see here in Division 2 of tomorrow's Arkansas Derby, is with Nadal, King Guillermo, and Wells Bayou all wanting to be on the lead. Something might happen here that we might just see this race go a little too fast early, setting the race up for a closer, which is where I'm going to be going here with my pick in this race. But let you have your thoughts on that, Marco.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to go the same horse with that close in this race, because if you look at his last race, this horse came from another zip code, okay? I thought he was running at a track in another state whenever he started his run, and he finished a bang-up second. And about when you said about rating horses, one of the ways that you try to train a horse, and Bob Baffert has done that this week with Nadal, or I should say leading up to this race the last few weeks. When you take horses out to train, there are two things that you do. You take a horse on normal days where you're just taking him out for a jog. You're taking him out for a gallop. You want to move the horse every day. He needs to just get his foundation, his miles in. You don't want the muscles. You want to keep those muscles moving, so he doesn't tie up and such. But then, you have training trips where you're going much faster. You're going race speeds. And when you go training trips, generally most trainers, especially the big barns, they train in sets. They don't go out and roll the horse by themselves all the time. Sometimes they'll go in sets because you want to have the horse. One time you'll have the horse on the lead and the other horse is stalking, or you'll flip them around. But when you train in sets, the one thing that you don't want to do, and you got to have, capable people riding the horses, is you don't want the one horse that's the horse that's following. You want him to come up and challenge and, maybe stick a head in front, but you don't want him to blow by the horse because you don't want to break the spirit of the training mate. You don't want one horse beating them, all the time. And so you try to get the horses to hit the wire as close together as you can, so both horses are fighting to the wire. And what they've been doing with Nadal is having him try to rate going the training trip sitting behind the lead horse and then coming up as they're driving down the stretch. So they're trying to teach them that, but a lot of times once that gate springs open and it's the real deal and you've got that thundering sound of 10, 12, 14 horses in a race, you can't control the horse, and he just does what he's bred to do and run. And these horses that are front runners, that's how you get these speed duels sometimes. And you sit there watching the race. And I know as an owner, I've sat there many times watching some of my horses, and I want to, reach up there and choke my jockey and like, what are you doing? Slow the fractions down. Sometimes you don't have a choice. And I think you are going to get the fast fractions here. So if we do get those fast fractions and the race falls apart late, who is that horse coming from another zip code?
My opinion, that horse is Farmington Road, the 10 horse. He's 12-1 in the morning line. Go back and watch the Oaklawn Stakes from a few weeks back. I swear this horse ran 1.5 miles, which is, in fact, the actual length of the Belmont Stakes. And it's one of the longest races for 3-year-olds you're going to see. Had a bad trip, came out. He basically was last in the field on the first turn. He was still last. And they actually, Vic Stauffer, the announcer at Oakland, will tell you, and trailing the field is Farmington Road coming down the back stretch. This horse started a run at the top of the second turn that was more impressive, not only because of the ground he made up. He hit the whole trip wide, made the top of the top of the stretch the widest horse in the field, and then came all the way down the stretch, almost ran up on the leader of the race, which actually slowed him down a little bit, and then still managed to finish second. It was a very impressive race out of this Todd Pletcher trainee. I think he has a ton in the tank, and I think we might see that here if we get this early pace that I'm expecting tomorrow, that we're going to be looking for a closer to come in and take over these horses that have used up what's in the tank. I'm not completely writing off Nadal. I'm using Farmington Road and Nadal on top, but Farmington Road at 12-1 looks very juicy to me tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And there's nothing more exciting in horse racing, especially as an owner. If you have a horse that's a closer and you see him flying through the stretch like that, but a lot of times you're subject. If you have a deep closer, you're subject to two things in every single race: pace and traffic. Both of them got to go your way for you to get there. And sometimes you just run out of racetrack. But if you go back and watch that race, the move he was making in the turn, it looked like the other horses were standing still as he was moving. And he was doing that in the outer pass. So he's traveling even more distance than the horses that were closer to the rail. Makes it even more impressive. I agree with you 100%. And for me, 4 in this are the 4, 5, 10, and 3. And this is a spot in Storm the Court. I have 4th, and I just want to make one mention about this horse. His 2 races so far this year, which were raced, first one in February, early February, then early March. They came back with the horse, getting the horse ready on what would have been the normal Kentucky Derby schedule. We didn't know the Kentucky Derby was going to be in September at that time. And his last race last year was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And Sig, I see this every single year. The horse that wins the Breeders' Cup Juvenile automatically gets stamped as one, if not the favorite, one of the favorites for the Kentucky Derby next year, because it's the last thing you saw. It's the biggest race of the year for 2-year-olds. It comes late in the season, and you see that, that winter future pool, everybody jumping on the bandwagon because, the horse won the Breeders' Cup. But it's almost like a jinx when you win that Breeders' Cup Juvenile. These horses just don't seem to come back and fire the same way at the start of the next year. They get a little bit better as the season goes on. So that could be good for Storm the Court. I think Storm the Court will be better in this race than he was in his first 2. I think he's still probably needed more time after the Breeders' Cup race. It takes so much out of you as a 2-year-old. But you were racing based on what was the normal schedule. And the normal schedule is you need to have 2 or 3 prep races before the Kentucky Derby. And that's where they were going with him. So he's a horse that's at 6-1 that has a license to be better than his last 2 lines show. So for me, it's 4, 5, 10, 3 in that one. And that is going to give us our previews of the first 2 races of the day in the the Arkansas Derbies. We have 2 races left on the card that we want to cover, and that would be for the pick 4, the late pick 4. And Sig, I want to say that although we got some chalk in these races, I still think the pick 4 can bring back a big number because there are going to be so many extra people playing on Saturday because this being such a power-packed card, 14 races, full fields in all of the races. It's going to be a great day of racing. And as I say all the time with the Kentucky Derby, there's going to be a lot of new or dead money betting on Saturday because there's nothing else to do right now. It's the only game in town, and people are going to want to be involved, and they're going to bet, and it's going to inflate the pools. And I think one of the absolute best races on the entire card on Saturday is race 12. And I'll let you start that. It's the first leg of the pick 4. Tell us where you're going.
Actually, race 11 is the first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Race 11. Race
11,
12.
We're both going with Charlton.
Yeah, let's
as
go.
a single. So
I'm sorry. Yeah,
the first real race.
Race 11. Sig and I both are singling number 1 Charlton. I just sorry for that misspeak there, but it's such a. I'll tell you what. If he loses on Saturday, Charlotte, me and you are going to just be dumbfounded, okay? It's like, I don't even, well, I'll just, I'm going to watch the rest of the races, but I might not want to. Sig and I both get Charlatan home in leg 1, race 11, singling number 1. Who are you taking in race 12?
Race 12 is leg 2 of the late pick 4 at Oaklawn. And another thing, too, as Marco just said, tomorrow's closing day at Oaklawn. These are going to be the last 4 races run at Oaklawn this year. So, this is basically a lot of people's last chance to get it bailed out for maybe having a bad day or a bad meet. So there will be a lot of money in this late pick 4 pool. Race 12 is the Oakland Handicap, and it's one of the most competitive races I've seen so far this year, field-wise. It was very hard to narrow down the horses I'm using, but I'm using 5 horses in this leg of the pick 4. The 12 horse By My Standards, who I'm not sure has won the past 2 races, but I'm not sure we've seen his best race yet. I'm using the 4 Mr. Freeze, the 9 Tacitus, the 14 Improbable, and the 2 is my long shot in here, Trophy Chaser.
Yeah, I can't disagree with some of your horses there. We're pretty much on the same leg. This is the biggest leg I went on this one. This race, I'll tell you what, I mean, if I would have singled somewhere else in the card, other than, having the single in race 11, if I could have found one other single, I'll be honest with you, Sig.
I'm with you.
In this race. Because I could really make a case for almost anybody in here. Just to give you an example, and I pitched him because I got to pitch horses. But you look at number 3, Bravazzo. He's 30-1, okay, on a morning line. And he hasn't raced good this year. But you go back and you look at the back class of this horse, what we're talking about with this horse, and he's in this race, that just tells you the depth of this race. This is a horse that raced on the Kentucky Derby Trail, the Triple Crown races, and it was a factor, big factor. Got me a big exacta in one of the legs. So I'm with you. This is a wide open race, and where I am going with my pick 4 here is, I agree, number 12 I'm putting on top. Number 2, I have a little bit higher than you do. You have him as your long shot at the tail end of your ticket. I have him as my second choice. And I think, 12-1, I don't know that we'll get 12-1 there. We could get numbers because it's going to be so spread out. I don't think anybody is going to get, you're not going to see an overwhelming favorite in this race. It's going to see a 3-5 shot that eats up all the money. After that, I have the 14 Improbable. And this poor guy, last 2 starts, can't draw to save his soul. Outside post again. And then number 7, number 4, and number 6. And as I said, this is a wide open race. We could number 6 is one of the interesting horses, and I put him on the ticket at the end. He's the last one, so if I was shortening my ticket up, he would be the first one. But just because of the speed this horse has, and as far as he can carry that speed, you look at what he's done. Now, this will be his toughest race to date, obviously, but Warrior's Charge has been, an incredible speed horse. He just doesn't have the seasoning as some of these other horses as far as racing in graded stake races. But he's got a ton of speed, Sig. And if we get one of those races we were talking about before where you expect a fast pace, if he gets a modest pace, not that I expect that to happen, but how many times have you watched a race when you thought there was going to be speed and then there wasn't, and all of a sudden that front runner that you threw out is up there uncontested on the lead and turning for home? It's like somebody come and run him down, and nobody comes.
Too many times to count. Too many times to count.
All right, let's go. Well, let's go to where we're going in the 13th race. We already talked about the race, but how are you playing it on your pick 4 for the second leg of the Arkansas Derby?
I am using 3 of the horses in here. We talked about, I love Farmington Road. Nadal, I'm not going to write off because I still think he has a good chance to win this. And I'm using King Guillermo, the 4 horse as well in here, because as we talked about, he's improved dramatically just from his 2-year-old to his 3-year-old season. And at this age, horses going between 2 and 3, you see the biggest jump in development in a horse. It's kind of like when you go home from high school, maybe your freshman or sophomore year, and the kid comes back, he's 5 inches taller and 30 pounds heavier coming in to like his junior year. Horses develop that quickly at this time, this part of their the aging process.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And for my leg here, and I went a little deeper. I went 5 deep in this one. And that's the beauty, that when you get a single in one of the races, yeah, you're putting all your eggs in one basket, but it really gives you a lot of ammo for the other legs that you can go deeper in. And I'm going with the 4, King Guillermo, 5, Nadal, the 10, Farmington Road with you. Then I put in the 3, Storm the Court, and then I threw in for a long shot on my 5th. I the 7 horse here, and Silver Prospector. This is a horse that is ultra consistent, but what you were just talking about with horses, and you see that big jump. My knock on Silver Prospector. And I'm not going to leave him off the ticket to beat me, but I have him in the last spot, and my knock is he's got 9 lifetime starts already. Now, I know you're going to have something to say about those 9 lifetime starts, because we had a little discussion about this yesterday, and it's a very valid point. But to me, when you get to, 9, 10 starts, that big jump that we talk about that a horse can have, or the light bulb race, it should have already happened. And I've always had I use the saying, stealing from Dennis Green, they are what we thought they are, and the horse is what he is at that point. I don't see him making those big jumps. Now, tell me anything you want to dismantle.
They started this horse off on the turf. They found out he wasn't a turf horse. So I'm tossing out those first 3 starts. This horse has made 6 career starts on the grass. And actually, I didn't give you guys my race of the day play for that division of the Arkansas Derby, but he is on my ticket there. I'm playing 10 Farmington Road, the win in place, and then I'm doing an exacta with the 5 Nadal and the 10 Farmington Road on top over 3 Storm the Court, as Marco already talked about, 4 King Guillermo, 5 Nadal, 7 Silver Prospector, and 10 Farmington Road. Silver Prospector is a Steve Asmussen horse with his top jockey, Ricardo Santana, at his home track at Oaklawn here. Every other race has been a good race, and the races he hasn't raced as well are sloppy or messy tracks, and he should get a nice course tomorrow. Like I said, like we mentioned, development of these horses at this age happens quickly, and I could see him being a factor in there. So yeah, did the second spot on my exacta here.
All right, we're running a little bit long, so we're going to roll through this last leg. And Sig, I've got 4 horses here. I've got the 5 horse in the last race is my top choice, but I have a long shot, and we're going to go 5, 13, 8, and 1. And the 13 horse is the horse that we opened the show up talking about in the handicapping tip. You go back and watch his last race, and when you watch that race, remember, he's saddlecloth number 8. He's breaking out of the post 7, but when you see a saddlecloth, watch the gray horse. Yeah, I know. And the fact that the horse's name was Curlin Gray, and Sig's watching a brown horse, okay, just watch his race. All you got to do is watch his last race and see the trouble that this horse had twice in the race, not once, but twice. First time about the 3/4 pole when he was making a big run, and the horse that was on the lead absolutely went to a stop. Jockey had to jerk him, pull him back, lose all momentum, got him fired back up in gear again, was making another move down the stretch and was splitting horses. And watch very closely as he's splitting the 2 horses. The horse on the outside, the jockey went to his inside whip, the horse on the outside, and he was whipping way out with his arm. And I actually think that the whip went across he didn't actually hit him in the face, but the horse saw the whip. It was that close. And you'll see the horse jerk his head, and the jockey had to grab him again. Lost all momentum, and then gathered him again in deep stretch and went past the 2 horses he was trying to split. So for this horse to be stopped and started as many times as he was in that race, and this being a very long race, I think this is a horse you've got to use on your ticket. And that was my tip for that race, and he's going to be a big price. Sig?
Okay, Marco talked me into it. I did add this. I had a $30 ticket going in to about noon today, and after Marco had me watch the race, I did throw that 13 on the bottom of my ticket. In this leg, I went 5, 14. That gives me a $37.50 ticket for a 50-cent base wager. My horses for the late pick 4 are 1 with 12, 4, 9, and 14, with 10, 5, and 4, with 5, 14, 9, 10, and 13.
And that ticket price again?
$37.50 at a 50-cent base.
All right. And my ticket goes race 11. I'm singling the 1. Race 12, 12, 2, 14, 7, 4, and 6. Race 13, 4, 5, 10, 3, 7. And race 14, 5, 13, 8, and 1. That ticket costs $60. If you want to cut that price in half and make it a $30 ticket, play exactly what I just said, except in the final leg, drop the 8 in the 1 and just go 5 and 13, and it makes it a $30 ticket. Me personally, I am playing the $60 ticket, and I am coming back and playing the $30 ticket as well, giving me an opportunity for a $90 investment to hit the pick 4 twice. That is going to wrap up a show, guys. Once again, I want to thank my partner in crime, Mr. Sig Las Vegas. You can follow him on Twitter at Sig Las Vegas. You can follow me, Marco in Vegas. We'll be back next week. We'll recap all the action from this week. Can't wait for tomorrow, 14 races. Check out Sig's plays at WagerTalk.com. You can check out my complete plays as well. We both put our top choices and our exact betting strategies together for you. Check that out at WagerTalk.com. Till next week, this has been the Pony Pundits. I'll see you in the winner's circle. Let's cash some tickets.